Welcome, everyone, to Authors Innovators 2025. This is our 9th session, and we have one of our favorite authors and guests, Brad Feld. Our calendars didn't sync, but we're going to get him for the next one this time. But you might recall that he joined us back in 2019, and we had a ball. So, Brad, welcome. I'm excited that you're here. For folks who don't know Brad, goodness, how do we introduce you, Brad? Brad's a legendary early stage investor, has been for a long while, and he's the founder of the Foundry Group, Mobius Venture Capital, and multiple companies, including Techstars. But from my perspective, he's a prolific author, a big thinker, and I am just delighted to have him here to talk about his new book, which you're all going to have to get, Give First. And I'm especially excited because Brad's thinking seems to sync quite well with our theme this year, the resilient entrepreneur. And so, in a time where I think venture capitalists and mentors and advisors ought to be rethinking their approach and having it be more about giving and benefiting part of a connected community, this book is just spot on. So, Brad, I'm going to have you give a little bit of a twist. We've talked about in our last Authors Innovators, startup communities, venture community. I don't have any of my books with me, Brad, because I have donated the ones, I had 4 copies of each, to various prison libraries. So know that you are inspiring resilient entrepreneurs as we speak. So talk a little bit about Give First and why that isn't just the usual pay it forward.
Yeah, 2 things that are really important. I'll start with 3 words, actually, or 3 phrases that I think embody this concept. One is non-transactional. One is positive sum. And one is multi-turn. And if you think about pay it forward tends to be something you do because someone once did something for you. So it has a transactional element. It also has kind of a single turn element to it. Like I'm going to pay it forward is when somebody says it, it's not like I'm going to keep paying it forward over and over and over again. And pay it forward is definitely positive sum. So that's not different. But those 3 words were sort of important, or those 3 phrases important to me. When I started putting this book together, it really combines 2 concepts. One is a philosophy, which is called Give First. And the other is the notion of how to be an effective mentor. And the 2 ideas are interwoven, and they come from my own experience. And one of the powerful things about learning how and being an effective mentor is that a lot of what you do is you don't tell people answers to things. You don't say you should do this, you should do that, here's what you need to do. But instead you guide them instead of controlling. You talk from your own experience, you tell stories. You have to be comfortable that all you're providing is data. You're not, the person that you're talking to, the mentor, could do something totally different. That has to be okay. It's their decision, not your decision. So there's a lot of stuff like in between these 2. And importantly for me, both concepts, the idea of this philosophy, which I refer to as Give First, and I'll define it in a sec, but also effective mentorship, both of them are, and I use the word philosophy a second ago, they're philosophies, not religions. Religions have a set of rules. You follow the rules and, whatever your religious tradition is. And generally you follow the rules and good things happen. Or if I describe myself as a Jewish atheist with Buddhist tendencies. For everybody who's not
it's a great plug for your blog too. One of my favorites, Feld Thoughts. If folks are thinking they're getting a dose of Brad now, they've got to get on that. And I love it in my inbox. So I got to tell you.
I had a friend recently and said, "What's that? What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, there's actually a category, within Judaism. There's not a lot of us, but there's a whole bunch of different ways to be Jewish. And there's like this whole segment that's atheist. And now there's this whole segment called Boo Jews, which are Buddhist Jews."
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
right.
like phrase at all.
Borrowing from great philosophies
Right.
and major religions. Yeah.
It is this idea of it's a philosophy, like you're incorporating this thinking versus I have a set of rules. My joke was going to be if you're Buddhist, you get to follow these rules and then you die and then you get reincarnated because you didn't follow them exactly right. You
Right.
get all over again. I don't want rules. I want ideas. I want you to, somebody when they read this, I want them to sort of see this and say, oh, this is interesting. I like this. This is helpful to me. I don't agree with that. Not my thing. And so as a philosophy, give first is something that's a way that I've been living my life for a long time, but has evolved into it over lots of experiences. And the definition, simply writ, is that you're willing to put energy into a system without defining up front what you're going to get out of it. It's not altruistic. You expect to get something, you just don't know when, from whom, over what time period, in what form, and what consideration.
Right.
And, a cynical person could say, well, isn't that just being generous? And then there's another part of cynical whatever, which is to say, oh, well, that sounds, the right way to, like, how are you going to win? Like, the right way to win is you have to, and it was very interesting to me where this philosophy evolved from. And I'll sort of end with this in this moment. When I wrote Startup Communities in 2012, I had a paragraph in it called Give Before You Get.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very simple paragraph. And it basically mostly was the same definition that I just used. 6 months later, Adam Grant, who's well known now, but at the time was less well known, organizational psychologist at Wharton, wrote a book called Give and Take. And I didn't know Adam, he didn't know me. We subsequently become friends. And I got his book and I read it, and it blew my mind because my book and Give Before You Get, when I wrote that as a precursor to Give First, it was just an anecdote. It was from my own experience. It wasn't research. And here Adam has a book called Give and Take. He defines givers, takers, and matchers. Obviously, anybody listening to this is interested in books, right? It was a powerful, powerful book. And for me, it was in the same category, for example, as Susan Cain's book, Quiet, or Sinek's book, Why. Like, these books that were really kind of powerful moments where you sort of step back and say, what does this mean? What Adam said early in the book, it's such a good book if you haven't read it. It tells a story of another VC, a friend I've known for a long time, a guy named David Hornick, who also really embodies this philosophy of give first. And he talks about, David, and gives examples of David as a giver. And then he sort of ends that story with, a situation where it looks like David sort of blew it because of this, lost a deal as a result. And he's, sort of ends. And then the twist is he says, in my research, I discovered two things. Number one, givers, in terms of who benefits, style, givers or takers or matchers. Again,
Right.
I'll get this if you give me this. He says, at the bottom, the biggest losers are givers. And the biggest winners are givers.
Right. Makes
And
sense.
that was the twist. It's like, right? And, he then, using his research, went very, very deep on this. And, what it becomes is sort of this idea of if you carry a philosophy around that you incorporate into your activity, it's not 100% of your behavior, and it's not a set of rules, but it's a way of engaging with people. It's a way of trying new things, being curious, experiencing new things, entering into new systems, relationships, without having to upfront define transactionally what happens, non-transactional, without viewing it as win-lose.
Right.
And by the way, I think the phrase win-win's a crummy phrase. I think it's turned into marketing when somebody says
Value added, all of the, yeah, right, right.
Run the other way. I'm like scared. Like, what are you going to take from me?
Yeah.
But positive sum is a powerful concept. Positive sum is that we both benefit, not equally, not the same amount, but we both can positively benefit from this. And then multi-turn is, our relationship's multi-turn. It's over a long period of time. Lots of stuff happens. And, sometimes things don't work, and sometimes you disappoint, and sometimes you fail. But if you play a multi-turn game, those are not cataclysmic. If you play a zero-sum, single-turn game, there's no trust, there's no relationship
Right.
that's developed. And for me, I don't want to live my life that way, and I haven't lived my life that way. And the people who I look at and respect and look up to, and the mentors in my life that have been so impactful on me, that's how they've behaved. And so that's the essence of where this book came from.
Yeah, I just love it. And I'm not saying it just because you're here. It really meets the moment at a time where both mentors and mentees ought to be reading this, because it is about authenticity, connectedness, with the frame that you want to help other people be successful.
Yeah.
And that's what really struck me. You wrote that recently you were musing, and I think kind of beating yourself up a little bit, saying, hey, is this book, Where I Am in My Life, an act of ego? And I want to explore that a little bit. So tell me more about that. I want people to go to Feld Thoughts to read that. But that just struck me as really you're thinking about authenticity, not just in these kind of relationships, but for where you are now. So I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So ego is a fascinating thing. And I think a lot of people that, if you spend any time in therapy, you'll explore it. If you spend no time in therapy, you probably, it means something to you in some way that's positive connotation, negative connotation. We all have egos. My little ego sits here on my little shoulder, and some of the time I go away, leave me alone. Like, I don't need to listen to you tell me what to do here. And I'm about to turn 60. I've had, a lot of success. I've had a lot of things not work, so I've experienced a lot of failure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a magnificent relationship with a woman named Amy for 35 years. I feel the experience on planet Earth, while it's had lots of ups and downs, and I've been very open, for example, with my own struggles with anxiety and depression. I've tried to destigmatize those struggles in the context of entrepreneurship, because everyone struggles with stuff.
Right.
The person who says, I'm killing it. Well, yeah, probably not on all dimensions are they killing it. So like, what's really going on? And so, in my own experiences over a long period of time, I've talked very openly about this stuff. And as I've gotten older, I think that fewer and fewer of the things I'm doing are being done because of ego gratification, ego needs. And in fact, like, my ego feels very satiated, generally. And every now and then it'll wander up to me and say, like, hey, whatever, or maybe I'll, hey, let's have a conversation about that. Maybe I need to get some of that in my experience. And so I wrote this book. It's the 9th book. I think this is probably the last nonfiction book I write.
Okay.
I started working on fiction, and I used to write software professionally. So until about 1992, when I no longer had time to do it because of the company that I was running, I wrote code, and I love it. It just like was a flow experience for me, and I missed it. And so I started doing it again 9 months ago. For those of you that want to see an example of a public creation, the very first thing I did just to see if I could do it was I wrote a game called Dinostroids, which is, for the old people in the room, asteroids, but instead of asteroids, it uses dinosaurs. It's up on the web, dinostroids.com. And I've been doing other stuff. So what I realized was I love this function of writing. For me, writing and reading are the way I develop ideas. It's the way I work through something. It's the way I learn and think. I don't really learn and think by listening to stuff or talking. What those things do for me is they reinforce the idea. So this conversation, I will come up with no new ideas in this conversation, but some of the ideas I have, it's like grooves in the record. They get a little deeper, they get a little cleaner, right? It makes them a little crisper. But the real sort of the learning comes from reading and writing. And frankly, an enormous amount of joy in life comes from that. And so kind of after I'd finished this book, and I'm out and I'm talking about it now, and most people are giving me positive feedback. Some people are kind of doing whatever. You ever put something out in the world, you're always going to have people be critical or not like it, or poke at something, which is a lot of the times very helpful because you learn from it. Like, oh, that was weak. I didn't do a good job on that. And sometimes it's just people that are, trolling you for whatever reason that gives them satisfaction. But I was in one of those moments one day where I was kind of um, I was uncomfortable with what somebody was saying in a positive way to me about it. So it was almost too much. It was like
Right.
they read it and they really loved it and they were being very effusive and detailed, like because there's a lot of storytelling in the book.
Right.
Key attribute of mentorship is to tell stories from your own experience. And so if I want to illustrate these points, I'm illustrating them with stories from my own experience because that's
Hmm.
a powerful way to do it. And they were saying something, and I kind of was sitting there feeling uncomfortable. And afterwards, and this is what prompted me to write that post, I'm like, was this an ego experience? Am I just like, look at me over here? And I got it out of my system. Like, I had a few people, I had a friend call me and say, you okay? Like, that was a weird post. And he
Well,
called me.
you're one of those people. I think it was Richard Russo said, I write to explore what I think about something, and
That's right.
it strikes me that's kind of you.
Absolutely.
That's you too.
I'm just working it out. Like, I don't know if my ego is in my
Yeah.
way or not, but I'm going to work it out. I'm not going to work it out by
Yeah.
just sitting there like this.
Right. So, what do you want? What do you want mentored? What kind of mentors? In what situations? And it's okay if you say all of them. In what situations you want mentors to take a look at this? It's a very readable, short, digestible book. There's a lot in there, but it struck me that you wanted it to be something that isn't intimidating. And someone says, "Oh, I'm so busy, I don't." Oh, wait, I do have time because it's a reasonable, digestible book. Who are the kind of mentors? Everybody's going to take their own meaning from it. What were you thinking when you wanted to put this out versus the other? This is your ninth book. You said, I want people to get this.
Yeah, I would say you said something earlier about mentors and mentees.
Hmm.
And I want to build off of that because that answers this particular question.
Right.
There's a magic trick in the mentor mentee relationship. And that magic trick is when the mentor and the mentee become peers. And I have experienced this at the beginning
I
of
love that. Love
mentee.
that framing.
Not that I
Yeah.
can build into it. As somebody, somebody is, you're in a interaction that's evolving as a mentor-mentee type interaction. I'm learning as much from the mentee as the mentee's learning from me.
Right.
I mean, that's the magic trick. It's not that this isn't again why pay it forward doesn't work for me. Pay it forward's obligatory. It's I am the wise one up on the hill, and now I'm going to present to you. I'm going to pay it forward and help you, young person trying to. Nah, it's until we expire, and we don't know when we expire. Like it could be a day from now, it could be 30 years from now. I hope it's 30 years from now, but whenever we expire, we can learn, and you can learn from everyone and everything. And the inverse of that is you can teach. And in the mentor mentee dynamic, that's so powerful. It's so beautiful. And it's something I've experienced in my own personal life. I've talked about it, my professional life multiple times. I tell some stories of some key mentors of mine in this book, like Len Fassler and my dad's younger brother, Charlie Feld. I mean, these were really formative for me as a young adult in my teenage years, in my 20s, and my 30s, in terms of how they interacted with me and how those relationships became peer relationships. And I learned from them and they learned from me. And that was a huge aha. And I've seen this now. Techstars has funded about 5,000 companies around the world. And I don't know the number of people I've interacted with. And it's not a formal dynamic. I don't say to people, I'll be your mentor. They say to me, will you be your mentor? I get a
Right.
lot. I don't think
It
about it.
evolves. Right. It's a
Right.
relationship.
You
Yeah.
let it evolve. But
Yeah.
in that dynamic, like the number of people who I expect from those experiences think of me as a mentor, what I've learned from them has been profound. And so it's reflective. And I think that's part of the goal of this book. Again, not to say here are rules for how to mentor. That would be a boring as shit book. And there's probably a book like that. It's also not, oh, mentor, if you want to get, the check mark of good mentorship, this is what you must do. It's observations from the experiences we had relatively early at Techstars in the first 3 or 4 years, generated something that David Cohen, one of the co-founders and CEO of Techstars, wrote called the Mentor Manifesto, Techstars Mentor Manifesto. And he just wrote it. I gave him a little feedback. Another guy, John Bradford, gave him some feedback, but he just put it out there. He didn't really spend a lot of time on it. It's bullet points. And what they were bullet points that were kind of catchy phrases that were reflective of things that we were seeing be effective. And a lot of them are combinations of, guide, comma, don't control, because ineffective mentorship is controlling, effective mentorship is guiding, right? So just very simple little things like that. And I'd written blog posts about it over time, sort of expanding on it, and plenty of conversations about it, but there really wasn't this sort of coherent thing that was easy to access. To your point, relatively short. The world, I mean, I've written my share of 225-page business book, and Venture Deals I think is now 400 pages. Like 100 pages is plenty.
But it's intentional, and you could
it's enough, digestible, and it's really, the book is, and I like to say it's 4 parts. Part 1 is defining Give First and defining the philosophy and talking about it, and just kind of getting into the mode of it and some storytelling around that. Part 2 is essentially deconstructing the Techstars Mentor Manifesto. It's got 18 quick chapters. Each chapter has a deeper description of what the one sentence means, an example from my own experience mostly. Mm-hmm. It's a couple of Easter eggs. There's a couple of funny things. There's a couple of when Amy, my wife, was proofreading the first sort of serious draft, what is this? And I'm like, I was just bored writing stories about myself, so this is the one you get.
It's a conversation.
And then sort of trying to wrap up and tie the pieces together. So I moves through that quickly. Every philosophy has problems, and Give First has some problems. And so the third section of the book is challenges around Give First. And not only challenges, but how I've had to deal with some of those challenges and some techniques around that to make it actually manageable, when it becomes more embedded within philosophy. And then the fourth chapter is a chapter called Entrepreneurial Tzedakah. And tzedakah is a beautiful word. It's a Hebrew word that means righteousness, but is often translated as charity. And I encountered it many years ago, but I encountered it a couple of years ago. Somebody had sent me something that were Maimonides' 8 levels of charity was the thing he sent me. And I started reading it. It was actually Maimonides an essay talking about tzedakah. Maimonides, if people don't know, is a 10th century Hebrew philosopher. And a Hebrew philosopher at that point in time covered a lot of geography because of the way that the world worked in the 10th century. And if you don't know what that means, go take a look type Google map 10th century, and you'll see. It's very interesting sort of philosophical bent at that point. And I'm reading it, and Amy and I love to read together. She lays on her couch, I lay on my couch, and we talk as we're reading if we run into something. And I read the first of the 8 levels of tzedakah, and I say as I'm reading, I'm like, holy shit! Oh, that's what I did. Thank you, Riverside. I said, holy shit! I said this out loud. Maimonides' first level of tzedakah is angel investing. Mm. And Amy, who's reading whatever she's reading, looks at me and says, what are you talking about? And a very interesting conversation ensued. Yeah. But I tried to put it together in this way with a goal in the end of being stimulating, of being provocative, of providing some ideas to play with, to pick and choose what's helpful and additive to someone, whether they're a mentor or a mentee, whether they're a founder at the beginning of their arc, whether they're somebody who's, at the end of their career. I wanted to try to make that kind of a book with this book.
And you did. I say that it meets the moment. I read it at the same time as I read Alison Pugh's The Last Human Job. Fabulous book about how technology can impact authenticity, efficacy, and our very relationships. So for folks who haven't read that, I recommend this with that. Alison Pugh's The Last Human Job. She's a sociologist at Johns Hopkins. It is a terrific book, and it really, so many of the themes intersect with what you're talking about. Authenticity, connectedness, and how even in the advent of this amazing technology that we're going to integrate into everything else, you cannot forget the human. And some things can't be replaced. They certainly can be improved, and the mentee-mentor relationship is one of them, and this is one of the ways to do it. I want to talk about hibernation because we're not going to see you after a little bit. I'm hopeful that you're going to keep up Feld thoughts. So tell me a little bit about hibernation, and then I got a couple of books that I want you to take into it.
Oh, I love your book recommendation, so that's going to be joyful. Here's hibernation for me. So I turned 60 on December 1st. Amy and I have very comfortably embraced this idea that we're now in the third of life. I hope it lasts for a while, but you never know. Professionally, I've been doing the same kind of thing for 40 years. First a founder, then an angel investor, then a venture investor, and along the way, a founder of multiple companies. I'm at a stage, and along that path, having a very public profile, not really clear why and how it developed, other than I invested all around the U.S. I traveled all the time. I was very in a bunch of networks and a bunch of different communities. And then when blogging started very early on in 2004, I started writing every day online. I was one of the very early investors to write regularly. Fred Wilson, David Hornick, a few others were in that category, but then continued it for a long period of time and then turned it into these books that have had a lot of broad influence. And of course, made a bunch of investments that are high profile, and people know I'm not the hero of those stories. The founders are the heroes of those stories. But again, part of the arc and landscape of what I've done.
Right.
A couple of years ago, after COVID lockdowns had come up, so until COVID, I traveled all the time. 75% of the time I traveled. And I was really trying to slow down the travel, but I was having a lot of trouble with it. COVID happened for 2 years, year and a half. Amy and I
slowed everybody down. Yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days with the woman I was put on this planet to be with. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I got to change this thing. So at post-COVID, I said, I'm done traveling. I'm not traveling for work anymore. And I've done it a little bit, not very much, but I kind of mostly turned it to zero. I also have had a lifetime of global travel, fancy restaurants, events. Amy and I like to be alone. We like to be one other couple. Like a group of four is awesome. Once you get bigger than four, it's too much for me. And I can function in that kind of environment, but it's not as fun. It wears me out. It depletes me of energy. So it was a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago, I decided to take the summer off. And I didn't announce that when I say take the summer off, still work, but take the summer off from having any public-facing activity. So no blogging, no podcasts, no in-person anything. No going places and being a part of events, just kind of living my life, doing my work, engaging in a meaningful way with the companies I was involved in, but no public anything, no social, and really no consuming either. So it wasn't like, okay, now I'll be a lurker. It's like, nah, I don't need to look at whatever's going on LinkedIn or X or whatever. So I took the summer off, and then all of a sudden I took the fall off.
Yeah, the mental fast.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
And then all of a sudden, when I flipped into default no, when somebody say, hey, can you come do this thing? No. Can you come do this thing? No. I'm comfortable saying no to things. At some point, people stop asking. And, when you're not as visible, they stop asking. So sort of then all of a sudden, I sort of fade into the background a little bit. I'm like, eh. So that summer turned into 2 years. And I took 2 years, and I didn't have a word for it. I didn't call it hibernation. I just had stopped, and I didn't make a pronouncement. It wasn't like, oh, and
Yeah.
watch this space for me to come back sometime in the future. I just stopped,
Yeah.
and it was awesome, awesome. Uh, when I decided to finish this book, and the book itself has, every book has a story. This book had a long story, and I had written a draft of it prior to going into hibernation, and I just put it on the shelf. I'm like, I don't feel like dealing with this. When I decided to finish the book, um, and I got to the end of last year with a mostly finished book, I'm like, this book feels good. I like this book.
Yeah.
And putting a book out into the world without like actually putting any energy into talking about the ideas behind the book seems kind of like a waste to me.
Right.
And these ideas felt important to me. They're ones I wanted to talk about. And so I decided to come out of hibernation. But this time, and then I had the language for it. I'm like, okay, I've been hibernating. I'm going to come out of hibernation. But I bounded it. I said, I'm only going to do it for 6 months. And so I decided that when I started, on Halloween at midnight, I'd turn into a pumpkin. Just
I love it. I love
before,
it. Well,
and go back into hibernation. And so for me, by the way, interestingly, with hindsight, I wish I had done 3 months instead of 6 months.
right.
But I made
Right.
commitments to people and things, and I decided, I'll follow through the commitments. But for me, that was also really helpful because there's this cliche in entrepreneurship that's been going on forever. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And Amy and I were talking about it one day, and she said, "What if we changed it and like this kind of activity were
Right.
sprints?"
Right.
And instead of having this marathon, of which I run a bunch of marathons, that every now and then, if you feel like you have something interesting to engage with in a public way for whatever reason, it's a sprint. And so when I go back into hibernation, maybe I'll never come out. Maybe I will. I don't have any idea. But the dynamic of how that sort of functional shift for me at now 60 is something that's become important. And
That's a big deal to give people space and the language for that kind of a conversation among themselves and with their founders and colleagues. And COVID changed so much for so many people.
the other thing which is interesting, I mean, I have work in front of me with the venture funds I'm involved in
Of
for
course.
a while because there's a long tail. But I also, as part of all of this, about 7 or 8 years ago, and Jerry Colonna wrote about this in his book, Reboot:
Reboot.
The Art of Leadership.
Terrific book.
He talks. We're soulmates. We're talking about. We're sitting outside one day in my backyard, and we're talking about whatever in 52 or 53. And I just looked at him, and I didn't really think about the statement before I made it. I just blurted out. I said, "Jerry, I'm done striving." I was kind of tired that day, and I was a little grumpy about something, and I'm just done striving. And he looked at me, and we then talked about it for a while. And what that meant was, you know what? It's not that I'm not going to accomplish more things. It's not that I'm not going to do other stuff. But that doesn't have to be the motive force that I have to accomplish this thing or make this money or get this recognition. It's that I'm doing the stuff. And, the cliche of the journey is the reward. Everybody says that, you hear that over and over again. You're like, yeah, except for, so tell me again why you're doing this way and going through this particular journey to try to get to this particular reward. How does that fit with it? And, for me, it was kind of like, what, I'm going to do stuff, but I'm not going to do stuff to make progress up, pick a thing.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's also very pertinent right now because I think generationally it's very hard. My dad's 87 and we talk about this a lot, and I'm fortunate he's still around and I can talk to him. Talk about the idea of relevance, and you think about the
Yeah.
idea of relevance and the importance of that, especially in American society, and the idea of relevance at older ages. Like, why is it so important? Why does relevance matter? And interestingly, if you think about generational changes and things, in fact, and I talk about this in startup communities, the worst thing that can happen to a startup community over a long period of time is that as people get older, they hang on by their fingernails
Right.
to power and control and relevance in the startup.
Right.
best thing to do is, as people have had influence, is to like make space for the next generation of leaders. And it doesn't mean that you have to
Yeah.
disappear and you become irrelevant, but you have to be comfortable with the idea that what you have to say and how you're going to engage is relevant. And if you try to hang on, and we see it in
Yeah.
politics all the time, but you see it in business and you see it in lots of aspects of society, people holding on to power and control, maybe back to ego for their own ego needs, maybe back to their own insecurities, versus, kind of changing the frame of reference and saying, you know what?
Yeah, I love that, Brad. Leaning into the new why, I think. So as you're doing that, so I wanted to give you space and think about it. One of the books we're covering, we recommend to you, Boston-based author Chris Burdick, Clamor, How Noise Took Over the World and How We Can Take It Back.
Okay. Move it to the left. It's out of the picture. Clamor.
This is just a terrific book. It is an examination of our ever noisier world and how it affects our health, our well-being, and the planet. So I'm going to recommend you read this as you start. Don't get it till Halloween, but read it then, and then of particular relevance, because I want you to be thinking about this next chapter. One of my favorite fiction books of the summer, and you'll get it. It's a hoot. I See You've Called In Dead by John Kenney. So John is a Boston. He's now a Boston native now in New York. It is about an obituary writer who writes his own obit after a few drinks and puts it online. He sort of gets fired, although it's challenging to fire a guy who's officially dead. And then, as he kind of awaits his fate at work, he does the only logical thing. He goes to wakes and funerals of total strangers to learn how to live again. And so I think you will have fun with this one. I certainly did. So there's your nonfiction and your fiction as you go into hibernation. One of my favorite Latin phrases from I See You've Called In Dead, memento mori. Remember you, and of course, memento vivere. Remember to live. So great books, and I want to encourage folks who are seeing this, give first. You will feel, as I do, just reading it, you're having a conversation with Brad. I am so glad you are here in the world, still writing. Keep doing it, please. I look forward to the next one.
Larry, thank you for this was a blast, and thank you for all you do. I will be back in person at some point because I love the event that you do. And thank you for the recommendations. I am not waiting for Calling In Dead.
It's great fun.
The book I'm reading now, which is I'm almost done with, is When River Loves Deborah, and it's fiction by a founder who runs a company called Winolo, which I have a tiny investment in. I had no idea he read it. I came across it, wrote it. He wrote it in the darkness of night as he's working on his company. I picked it up. It's spectacular. If you're interested in love story and you're interested in entrepreneurship and you're interested in, growing up sort of from college through young adult journey of all the challenges of that, it's for a first novel, brilliantly and wonderfully written. But the next one is Calling In Dead. Right when that one finishes,
I just love it. Brad Feld, thank you so much. A big Authors and Innovators, thank you. Appreciate you.
My pleasure, Larry.